Today, I want to be talking about God's judgment on the nations that we see in the book of Isaiah. I've titled this, How God Deals with a Flat Tire. God is going to deal with this nation of Tyre and with flatness spiritually, not with power, not with prestige, but with spiritual standing. And we're going to see God dealing with Tyre today in a unique way that looks way into the future with a prophecy that's a blessing. And we're going to see that when we come right back. Welcome to Bible Study with Friends, where our goal is to help you get more impact from your Bible study, help you study the Word, help you make notes in the Word, and help you apply it to your life. I'm here with my friend Jacob Curtis, and Jake and I are going to continue our study in the book of Isaiah. Today we're going to be in the 23rd chapter, and this is interesting because it's the end of a whole series of judgments on the nations that we saw when we started this section back in chapter 13, verse 1, all the way to chapter 23, verse 18, the end of this chapter. So this is the last prophecy of all the nations, and it's going to talk about Tyre. Why is it going to talk about Tyre as the last nation? Why not a big one like Assyria or Babylon or Jerusalem itself, which we did last week? So we're going to see this oracle, this last burden regarding Tyre. I got creative with the title of today's message. I titled it, How God's Plan Deals with a Flat Tire. Hello, are you there?
Sorry. That is pretty clever.
It's okay. I'm sure that people on YouTube will go, what is he? Anyway, we'll see
Pretty
how
good dad joke.
that actually does fit as we go here. But let's start and go into these chapters looking at how God's plan deals with Tyre. We could describe Tyre as flat spiritually. They're very powerful at this point in history. They are a huge trade conglomerate, a shipping dynasty, you might say. And we're going to see that as we go here. So let's go right into the first verse and go ahead and read 1 and 2.
The oracle concerning Tyre. Wail, O ships of Tarshish, for Tyre is destroyed. Without house or harbor, it is reported to them from the land of Cyprus. Be silent, you inhabitants of the coastland, you merchants of Sidon, you messengers across the sea.
The first thing we would ask ourselves is, where is Tyre? Where is Tarshish? And where is Cyprus? Just to put it into our mind. So I want to go and I'll share this with you. You go to a Bible atlas and you start to look up some of these places, and it starts to give us a picture of where he's talking about geographically. Otherwise, they're just names on a page and not really a place we can identify, right? So let's look at this together. Let me show you a map of the world. Right over here to the far right is Tyre, and right above it is Sidon. We're going to have that name come up here in a second. And then down from there is Joppa. You remember Joppa is the city that the prophet Jonah ran to when God told him to go up to Nineveh. He went to Joppa and he caught a ship to Tarshish. If we ask ourselves the question, where is Tarshish? It's all the way over here. It's on the western side of Italy. So it was a major port, a major exporting nation. We'll see what it exported in a second. You can see that. Now, Cyprus is this island right here with this Kittim. So sometimes Kittim is known as a boat harbor where a lot of the merchant ships of the day were moored, which is a shipping dynasty that goes from Tyre to Cyprus all the way around to Tarshish and then down to the Egyptian Nile delta and back. So there's this route that you could say the ships of the day go from Tyre and Sidon through Cyprus, or from Cyprus to them and then around. It's a shipping conglomerate from Tyre, basically all over the known world of the day.
Yeah.
Okay. It went from there to Tarshish. We talked about Jonah, that he ran to Tarshish because it was the farthest he could think of away from Nineveh. So you see this map, and now we have a picture of where some of these areas are. And Tyre and Sidon are just north. If you see real small, right under the P in Joppa, is the Dead Sea. So Jerusalem would be placed about where the O is in
Mm.
Joppa. So you see up north of Joppa is Tyre and Sidon. In fact, Jesus goes to there later on. But that gives us a clue now of where these countries are. Now, it's very interesting here. You get a term called the ships of Tarshish.
Mm.
Now, that's not talking about that the ships were from that nation. What it's talking about is a class of ship, like you might say it's the Nimitz class. It was symbolic of a big, beautiful working vessel of the day. Now, I want to show you a couple verses. If you go to 2 Chronicles chapter 9, verse 21, 2 Chronicles 20, 36 and 37, and then Isaiah chapter 2, verse 12 to 17. Let's look at that one. Flip over to Isaiah chapter 2, verse 12
through 17. For the Lord of hosts has a day against all that is proud and lofty, against all that is lifted up, and it shall be brought low, against the cedars of Lebanon, lofty and lifted up, and against the oaks of Bashan, against the lofty mountains, and against all the uplifted hills. Every high tower and every fortified wall, against the ships of Tarshish, and against all the beautiful craft, all the highness of man shall be humbled, and the lofty pride of man shall be brought low in the day of the Lord, and the Lord alone will be exalted in that day.
Okay, those verses basically talk about God is against the proud and the people that are proud of their beauty, and it gives a whole list of beautiful things. And on that list is the ships of Tarshish, okay? So it's talking about not a particular ship from the country of Tarshish, but a type of ship, the pride of the seas. And this starts to give us a hint that God is going against the proud nation of Tyre and their pride in these beautiful, large types of ships that are the pride of the seas and the pride of the shipping conglomerate that's headquartered out of Tyre. Now it says, wail, O you beautiful ships, because Tyre is destroyed without house or harbor. And that's talking about Cyprus. So it's hard to have a shipping conglomerate if you have no places to park your ships. This is the prophecy against Tyre. Notice the verb is Tyre is destroyed. That's present tense. And it says that your messengers have been going all over the world, that shipping conglomerate we saw. And there were many waters. The grain of the harvest of the river Nile was her revenue. In other words, you guys used to make a lot of money. And if you notice, the tense was were. I'm against you now. You used to be really powerful, but now there's a problem. And it says, she was the market of the nations. That's this idea that Tyre and Sidon were shippers of goods all over the nations of the known world of the day. Is making sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Now read verse 4 and verse 5.
be ashamed, O Sidon, for the sea speaks, the stronghold of the sea, saying, I have neither travailed nor given birth. I have neither brought up young men nor reared virgins. When the report reaches Egypt, they will be in anguish at the report of Tyre.
Okay, wait a second now. What is it talking about when it says, I have neither travailed nor given birth? I have neither brought up young men nor reared virgins. What is it talking about there? Did it make any sense?
No, I'll be honest. I had to research that and figure it out.
My note was that the wealth of Tyre and Sidon is mentioned up in verse 4, you ought to be ashamed of yourself because you got all this wealth without working for it. It just came. You didn't have to go through the birth pains. You didn't have to rear up children and go through all that work. All of a sudden, all this wealth just came to you. It makes sense because it's saying you are fantastic and you're all powerful and you're rich, but it just happened to you. And it says, now when you're judged, even the Nile is going to be in anguish because it's losing a way to distribute its goods around the world. Without the shipping of Tyre and Sidon, there was no way to get goods from Egypt to Tarshish, Cyprus, or anywhere else for that matter. So they were in anguish that Tyre is falling. Now we know from history that Tyre fell between 700 and 638 BC. Was a 70-year period where Assyria was attacking Tyre. And we also know that the book of Isaiah is written right up to 700 BC with a prophecy that's going to happen in the next few years. It's just going to happen that Assyria is going to attack and destroy Tyre. So it's just a historical perspective there.
Yeah, interesting.
Now let's go back. Verse 6 and 7.
Pass over to Tarshish, wail, O inhabitants of the coastland. Is this your jubilant city, whose origin is from antiquity, whose feet used to carry her to colonize distant places?
Here's what's interesting about those verses. All the inhabitants of the coastland that all these shippings were going to, it says, is this your jubilant city? In other words, Tyre was this very large trading city, and it was the pride of the nation. And it says, you're very jubilant in that city, whose origin is from antiquity. Now it's interesting because you mentioned that Tyre is still in existence today, but Tyre was destroyed a number of times through history. Herodotus, the Greek historian, recorded that Tyre was founded as a city in 2700 BC. When this is written, and when it talks about your city of antiquity, Tyre was already 2,000 years old as a city. So they were very proud of this large city. Yeah, it had been conquered before and it was about to be conquered again, but it would rise back up and be a city. Even in Jesus' day, Jesus was going to visit Tyre and Sidon in the Gospels. We see these little historical notes that are spread through there. I find very interesting. Ties together what God is doing and what his plans are. Now, here is an interesting question because you could ask yourself the question from verse 8 down to verse 11. I want you to read those verses answering the question. It says there's an oracle against Tyre, and Tyre is going to fall. Tyre is going to be judged. Who is doing that? Yeah. And we're going to see the answer to that in those 4 verses. Go ahead and read, and I'll just stop you as we go along.
Who has planned this against Tyre, the bestower of crowns, whose merchants were princes, whose traders were the honored of the earth? The Lord of hosts has planned it, to defile the pride of all beauty, to despise all the honored of the earth.
What we see here is this judgment on Tyre and the problems that Tyre has in the world are not a coincidence. This is a planned series of events against Tyre and Tarshish and really the shipping conglomerate of the world. And it's planned by God. My title was How God's Plan Deals with a Flat Tire. I like that title. You see what it's saying there is this is a planned series. And we see that in these prophecies that basically God has a sovereign plan over the nations of the earth. We've seen that since chapter 13, all the way to chapter 23. Start back up in verse 10.
Overflow your lands like the Nile, O daughter of Tarshish. There is no more restraint. He has stretched out his hand over the sea. He has made the kingdoms tremble. The Lord has given a command concerning Canaan to demolish its strongholds.
Canaan is the region that Tyre and Sidon are in. And so the Lord has given a command concerning this whole region to demolish its strongholds. Now, there's a couple of things in here. In verse 10, when it says, overflow your land like the Nile, what happens every year in the Nile Delta?
I assume it floods.
It floods. And that flood is a blessing to the land because the flood gives the land fertility or water. But here it's saying God's judgment is going to come like a flood. It's going to come like a flood over Tyre and Sidon. It's going to flood over Tarshish, Cyprus, Egypt. It's going to come fast and heavy. And you might say it's going to get deep because it's going to flood. Now we go back. Then it comes down, it says, he has stretched out his hand. Notice the he. Up here it says, who has planned this against Tyre? The Lord. He has stretched his hand over the sea. He has made the kingdoms tremble. The Lord has given a command concerning Canaan to destroy its strongholds. Now, when it's talking about destroying the strongholds, we know that it's talking about the strongholds that it's really proud of. The shipping, the trade, the gold, silver treasure that was going all over the world, bringing grain from Egypt, that these were strongholds that Tyre and really the whole world really trusted in. And I got thinking, Jake, what are the strongholds in our lives that we trust in? Maybe our bank account, maybe our prestige, our reputation. Same kind of things that Tyre was dealing with. The prestige, the power, the wealth that it had, the reputation that it had. I ask myself the questions, am I open to God judging my strongholds because I've put false trust in them? Does that make sense for an application question?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Yeah, I didn't even think of that.
So we can stop and go, wait a minute now, what are the strongholds in my life that I really depend upon for my feeling of security? I can't trust in those strongholds because God can take those strongholds away in an instant. So the answer is to trust in God rather than trust in my strongholds, as it would say in that verse. Would be an interesting point of meditation and personal application. It goes on and says, he said to me, that's the Lord,
Right.
you
Yeah.
shall exalt no more, O crushed virgin daughter of Sidon. Arise, pass over to Cyprus. Even there you will find no rest. Go to your harbor, and you're going to find no rest over there. Behold, the land of the Chaldeans. This is the people which was not. Assyria appointed it for desert creatures. They erected their siege towers. They stripped its palaces. They made it a ruin. Now, this is talking about the land of the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans were the Babylonians.
Yes, Babylonians. Yep.
He's basically saying this is being written right when Assyria was taking Tyre, about 700 to 638, right in there. Not until, I think, 200 years later, Babylon takes over Assyria and then attacks Tyre. And that's what it's talking about. This is a prophecy that this region that Assyria has defeated is coming back, and God is going to use the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, to judge Tyre and Tyre's pride, right?
Right.
An interesting prospect, an interesting prophecy. Now, we see another prophecy that's amazing here. It says 14, wail, O ships of Tarshish. That's the second time it said that. For your stronghold is destroyed. But look at 15. In fact, read from 15 to 17.
In that day, Tyre will be forgotten for 70 years, like the days of one king. At the end of 70 years, it will happen to Tyre as in the song of the harlot. Take your harp, walk about the city, O forgotten harlot. Select the strings skillfully, sing many songs that you may be remembered. It will come about at the end of 70 years that the Lord will visit Tyre. Then she will go back to her harlot's wages and will play the harlot with all the kingdoms on the face of the earth.
Oh, it's very interesting here. We see a very specific prophecy of 70 years, and this is
Mhm.
written up to 700 BC. But we see between 700 BC and the next 70 years, 630 BC, Assyria is restricted Tyre's trade. Assyria comes in and attacks Tyre, and it no longer can ship. It no longer
Mm,
can be part of the worldwide trade. So for 70 years, Tyre is withheld. This idea of Tyre will be forgotten for 70 years. And then
mhm,
there's this kind of strange thing that the end of 70 years, it will happen to Tyre as in the song of the harlot. And it's talking about the harlot's going to come back and she's going to walk through town with a harp and sing a song, right? What's it talking about?
I assume that Tyre will be able to go back to its normal trade business and shipping routes.
And when it does, it's going to advertise itself to the world. Basically,
Yeah.
that was the harlot that was maybe left town. She comes back, and the first thing she does is she walks through town singing a song saying, "Hey, I'm open for business." After 70 years, there's going to be a period where you go back to selling your wares all over the world, just like the prostitute. That makes sense? You see where
Yep.
the prophecy is going now? Now,
Yep.
read, let's look at just the last verse, because this is a very interesting verse for us as believers and for Israel. Read verse 18.
Her gain and her harlot's wages will be set apart to the Lord. It will not be stored up or hoarded, but her gain will become sufficient food and choice attire for those who dwell in the presence of the Lord.
Now, what that's saying is when Tyre comes back and does business and gets wealthy again, that wealth is going to be for the benefit of God's people, for those who dwell in the presence of the Lord. You're going
Yeah.
to say, what? That is, I want us to go back to these notes I made at the very top just to show you what I'm talking about here. Let's go through a little history. Assyria attacks Tyre and weakens it, right? Then after 70 years, Tyre makes a comeback to wealth. It's playing the harlot to the whole world again, shipping, making money. Then Babylon comes along and conquers it. And that happens between 605 and 536 BC, 100 years from when Assyria first starts to attack Tyre. So this is 100 years in the future. This is what's going to happen. We know this from history. Babylon comes in, conquers Tyre. Then Babylon is conquered by Persia.
Hmm.
And 70 years after Babylon takes over Israel, Persia uses the wealth of Babylon to pay for the rebuilding of the city and the temple in
I
Jerusalem.
think that's in Ezra.
It's recorded in other places too. In Daniel, the permission is given to go back, and they
Oh,
go
that's
back
right.
and they struggle to build a wall and build a temple. And they're struggling along. And finally, Artaxerxes, the Persian king, says, I'm going to give you money from the Persian bank
Empire.
account to help pay for rebuilding the city that was captured by Babylon. So here we see a direct prophecy that wealth that Tyre gets when it comes back after that 70 years, God's got a plan, and all that wealth that Tyre is accumulating is ultimately end up to the benefit of God's people, those who dwell in the presence of the Lord.
Amen.
Interesting. And that basically saying God's plan for dealing with the nations, dealing with other people, dealing with the power and prestige we've talked about, and dealing with people's strongholds that they trust in. God's plan always has in mind his people,
Yeah.
our benefit, the people of Israel, the people of the Gentiles. God's plan to deal with Tyre is ultimately for the benefit of his people. Something for us to think about.
Mm.
What God might have done in the past, what he's doing in the present, that is to your benefit and my benefit, is a great reasons why I want to dwell in the presence of the Lord. I want to dwell in a relationship with the Lord. Why? Because his plan is to take care of me as a believer. And we see that. And I think that's why Tyre is chosen to be the last of the nations that are prophetically judged, because Tyre is the one that God is going to use the wealth of Tyre to funnel around through history to ultimately benefit the people of Israel. That makes sense? Is why it's there?
Yeah, makes sense.
Any
And there's
comments? Anything you observe in our study?
just another testimony that God's in control.
He's sovereign.
He
It's
is
so
so.
important. We look at people that are rich and powerful and doing well, and we go, oh man, that's terrible. What is God doing? God's lost control. No, he hasn't. He is sovereign and he has a plan. And he is totally capable to execute his plan for the benefit of his people. And you and I are included by grace as the people of God. We've been talking about that God has a way of dealing with nations for the benefit of his people. We see how God is sovereign over the actions of nations and over the future plans he has for them. I want to recommend a video to you. It's called Open Doors, Free Will, and God's Sovereignty. It's out of a series I did on how to find God's will for your life. And I think you'll enjoy it. If you do, hit the like button. We're going to continue in our study of the tribulation period. We're going to look at that next week. God bless you.